if public money goes into private institutions like Catholic schools, like Christian schools, and they start saying that, well, you need to have the same requirements that public schools have, and since SEL is a requirement for them to report back on a non-cognitive factor because of the Every Student Succeeds Act, any SEL program that's going to be put into these schools is going to be transformative in the long run.
Welcome, everybody, to Conversations That Matter. I'm your host, Alex Newman, a very special guest with us today, one of the leading experts on this subject in America. I told her before we started I could count on two hands the number of people who really understand what's going on with the social-emotional learning, at least who understand and don't like it. So Lisa is the host of, among other things, Parents of Patriots, a wonderful show. You can find it on YouTube for now. She is a busy mom of three. She spent the last year and a half warning people all across the country about the dangers of this so-called transformative social emotional learning. We're going to talk a little bit about that. She's been going all over the place, speaking to big groups, small groups. She's been doing a lot of shows. I saw her on Steve Bannon not long ago. She did a wonderful job sounding the alarm. And she's been arming parents with the tools they need to push back and protect their children. She also has a Substack. It's Education Manifesto, and she is on Twitter now that apparently free speech has been restored, at least for the time being. You can find her there at I am Lisa Logan. Lisa, welcome to the program. Let's start with the very basic facts here, because I think a lot of people still are not up to speed on what's happening. What is social emotional learning, and why is it so incredibly dangerous?
Social emotional learning is actually a mental health program that's been put into our education system. And our whole education system has actually been reframed around teaching and assessing social emotional skills, which are these very soft skills, right? They could be empathy, perspective taking, self-management, self-awareness. But a lot of these subjects lend themselves to extrapolating on certain subjects that create a critical consciousness in children. So it gets the children to think about the world in a way where they think the whole systems and institutions of America are set up to oppress particular groups of people, whether that be people of color, people who are LGBTQIA, and then kind of manipulating their sense of empathy and perspective taking to want to become social justice activists to fix those particular problems in our society.
Yeah, and I love the way you put it. That may be the best definition I've heard so far. And it's just, you hit the nail on the head. They say, oh, we're just teaching them how to compromise. We're just teaching them how to be empathetic. And then, by the way, to be empathetic, you have to believe in open borders. You have to believe that we have to dismantle the institution of marriage. And so that's what empathy comes to mean once this gets injected in the schools. Now, I've gotten a lot of emails about this lately. Just this weekend, I got a few. They're now trying to Christianize SEL. That's even coming into the Christian schools. They're saying we have a Bible-friendly version of SEL because they added in, a proverb totally out of context. Can this be adapted to Christian schools? Can this be adapted to private schools in a way that you think is sensible?
I think that we should just do away with SEL in schools entirely, because the problem is when you teach something, you have to assess it. And if public money goes into private institutions like Catholic schools, like Christian schools, and they start saying that, well, you need to have the same requirements that public schools have, and since SEL is a requirement for them to report back on a non-cognitive factor because of the Every Student Succeeds Act, any SEL program that's going to be put into these schools is going to be transformative in the long run, because that is something they will mandate: culturally responsive social emotional learning. And so those programs that seem very nice and beautiful, that may teach it in a way that's not destructive or harmful, unfortunately, they will have to bend their knee to this agenda.
Yeah, so well put. Lisa, recently, I started digging into how SEL was being used for global purposes, and you've done some research on this as well. In fact, I did recently an article for the New American, a big in-depth look at this kind of obscure UN agency, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Education on Sustainable Development and Peace, or something along those lines. It's a UNESCO agency, and they're really open on their website. We're using SEL to build kinder brains in children. We're using it to transform attitudes and values. What is happening at the global level, and where are they going with this? What's the purpose of injecting this into the classroom all over planet Earth?
Well, they even say in their papers that social emotional learning is for the Sustainable Development Goals. I know you have an astute audience. They probably know what the Sustainable Development Goals are, but basically they're 17 goals that they are pushing to get achieved by 2030. And while many of them seem very noble, like zero hunger, no poverty, etc., many of them are trying to be accomplished through the globalization and domination of literally every system of society in the name of global equity. So they need social emotional learning because when confronted with some of these sustainable development goals, for instance, let's talk about the energy stuff, the environmentalism. They believe we need to go to zero carbon, for instance, and we need to do away with nuclear energy and all sorts of other things. Well, that might mean a huge sacrifice on the backs of the people, right? Doing with less energy, driving electric cars, maybe having to stop your car and charge your car for 3 hours to continue on your trip. And so when they're confronted with these things and they have their own internal beliefs, most people have a thing called cognitive dissonance, where they kind of like, well, no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't kind of vibe with my own beliefs and values. And they tend to choose, obviously, the path of least resistance. They're not going to challenge their values and then adopt this new way of thinking. So they use social emotional learning as a cudgel to kind of beat the acceptance out of people. They manipulate that sense of empathy and perspective taking to teach them to kind of be docile and accept these other ways of thinking and believing, so that they can then accomplish their sustainable development goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the folks out there who haven't seen the SDGs, we've focused on them a lot at the New American, but I mean, go read them. Go read the one on education, the one that they brag about at this UNESCO Institute. They tell you we're going to teach children to be global citizens, right? Which is problematic in and of itself. They talk about gender equality, which kind of sounds cute on first glance, and then you realize it's like radical feminism and dismantle the family. So they've got all these nice terminologies to hide things that I think are at the very least controversial. No matter where you stand, we all agree that there is controversy around these issues. Lisa, one of the things that really jumped out at me so clearly as I was looking into this institute, and I'm going to try to get over there and visit them. I want to say hi and go see them in person in India. But the one world spirituality just comes through so loudly and so clearly. The leadership from the beginning of this institute has been basically communists, pagans, New Agers, psychiatrists, and neuroscientists. And the one unifying theme that keeps coming up over and over again in the work that all these people are doing is this idea of a one world spirituality. We really all kind of just believe the same thing. And, these divisions within our religions are kind of artificial. What do you think is going on with that? To give a good example, the guy who was the chairman of the board of this MGIEP or whatever it is, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Education, Peace and Sustainable Development, he was a leading advocate of this idea that we're all really one religion, that all religions lead to the same place, that we all have the same general beliefs, and that really the purpose in life is to kind of realize all that, which in my view contradicts the Christian understanding of the meaning of life and things like that. But do you see this one world spirituality stuff as a significant concern?
Oh, definitely. One of the recent articles out of 4 that I wrote for the Ohio Press Network was called Social Emotional Learning, Building a Nation of Nuns for the New American Religion. And really what social emotional learning does, and interestingly enough, where social emotional learning was born was out of this Fetzer Institute. You've written about it, Alex, a lot. And they have roots to esoteric religion, Alice Bailey, the Theosophists, etc. And what social emotional learning does is takes kids through these 5 stages of religious change, which are kind of based on the 5 stages of cultural change. It gets them to question their original identity, right? And that's really kind of tied to their family unit and their familial beliefs and their cultural beliefs. They build a culture of belonging through the schools. Then they feel like, oh, well, I need to advocate for these causes, and they indoctrinate them. They then get them to kind of belong to this new group where this is their belief system, and they're going to advocate for these particular causes. And so the way that they pull them away from their parental beliefs is because Fetzer, where it was born, they say that, if you believe in your dogma of your faith, like your doctrine, right? They think it's life denying, and there literally are working with spiritual traditions right now, a bunch of them. So they operate as they usually do. There's one group that does, and there's a second group within that spiritual tradition that is operating in a way to be very muddy, and I call it spiritual soup, right? Like anything goes. You can believe, in more than two genders, even though your Bible says it doesn't, and things like that. And so there is a move by these people, Fetzer, UNICEF, people at Columbia University, to literally create nuns out of our children. And when I say nuns, I'm not talking about NUNS, the spiritual sisters, the Catholic sisters. I'm talking about NONES, people who are spiritual but not religious and have no doctrinal or deity in their life. They just kind of are, let's love everybody and belong to this one world religion.
What an excellent summary of what's happening. And you don't have to dig far, folks, to find this stuff. I mean, I know if you're probably just coming across this, you're like, really? No way. You really don't have to dig far. One of the people that I've just started looking into, her name is Linda Lantieri. She's a co-founder of CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is the kind of the powerhouse in the SEL movement. She's at, she's affiliated with Teachers College at Columbia. She's also a fellow over at the Fetzer Institute. And I've got a video of her where she's talking about one of these spiritual entities that she's conversing with. I mean, it just, this is not stuff that a Bible-believing Christian can possibly incorporate into the mix of what's acceptable theologically to teach children. It's just really, really out there. Folks, we're going to come back on the other side of this and talk about how to deal with this. I think there are good ways and bad ways to respond to this. And unfortunately, a lot of Republican legislatures are like lemmings running direction bad way. So we'll be right back, and we'll talk more about what is happening in terms of battling this in just a moment.
All right, parents, listen up. We've all seen the countless examples of how radical leftists have been destroying American schools. It's no longer just about the terrible math and reading levels. Now, radical left teachers birthed from liberal universities are forcing gender indoctrination in kindergarten. They're teaching lessons on white guilt.
Freedom Project Academy has perfected live online learning over the course of a decade. I get a ton of great feedback about this program, a ton.
They're built on Judeo-Christian values, a classical curriculum. What does that mean? It means they're taught, your children are taught the way that the founding generations of the country. My own son Noah did Freedom Project Academy for several years when he was younger.
The more we tell our friends about these things, the more people will get on board, and I believe that we can be the catalyst to some real change.
We must save the West. Our way of life and our culture is under attack, and because of patriots like you and your project, I have optimism for the future.
Lisa, let's talk about, I mean, obviously we have a problem. We went over that in the first part of this. Now, there are a lot of people who are waking up and realizing we have a problem. And so this idea of school choice has now kind of come to the fore. Almost every Republican-controlled legislature that I know of is talking about this as we speak. They're debating it. They're passing bills on it. And the general gist of it is, well, the public schools are a total mess. We got to get the kids out. So let's just give everybody lots of tax money to homeschool or private school. You have some concerns about that idea. Share with us why.
Anytime that you have public money going into private entities, it always brings strings. Just because by definition, when you have public money, you have to have public accountability. And so that usually means data collection. That usually means, especially for homeschool parents, maybe they no longer are considered homeschool parents, and they don't have the protections of that affidavit that they sign, and the protections of the laws that homeschoolers have. Then you have the whole problem of bringing this whole agenda that we're seeing in the public schools. They say, oh, you have to escape government schools. But what happens when you make these private institutions that are your choice options into government schools through the regulations tied to public funding? So again, you're going to see that same agenda where they have to teach social emotional learning, and they have to, maybe religious institutions will have to hire teachers that don't align with their faith practice. And so we're seeing a lot of these things happen. Plus, it's a very unconservative position. I mean, people say, oh, it's my money and I'm going to get it back. But with $8,000 a student there, I mean, there was one mom on a thread, has 12 kids, and she was saying she was going to utilize this program. Well, that's a lot of money. And so I don't know if they spend, $96,000 in taxes, but obviously then you're like, this is this redistribution of wealth. This is going to raise people's taxes as they expand this program. I mean, there's so many factors that just really said that this is a very rushed, very not well thought through option for people to get out of these bad situations that they're in the public schools.
Yeah. And if you look at the bills that are going through the legislatures, what you'll find is exactly what you're saying. Almost all of these bills say as soon as you take the money, then you got to take the test, then you got to provide the data to the government, then you got to meet with a government bureaucrat who's going to look at your child and determine what his or her or their, I guess in the modern parlance, educational needs are going to be. Really, really concerning. Now, Lisa, you did a groundbreaking report. I actually wrote an article based on what you brought to my attention about UNESCO. They had a report last year that was commissioned that actually talked about this idea that we could have public-private partnerships and basically make the private schools do what we say. Share with us kind of what you think the agenda is. What are they up to?
I think they're trying to create a single system of education, single payer education. And so because this is the problem, I mean, they think the reason they like school choice at this point, because these private schools and homeschools and all these other things, charters, they already are a part of the education system, and they admit that. David Senge, who is he's the Minister of Education for Sierra Leone, was on stage at the Rewired conference literally saying, like, hey, yeah, we're fine with school choice, and we're fine that all these other private actors belong in education now, but we're going to regulate them. And specifically in that paper that you covered, Alex, they talked about all of the different equity government regulations they were going to enforce on private schools once they took this public money. And they talked about hiring practices. They talked about tuition controls. I mean, all of these things. And they're not very shy because what they really want is to make school choice more equitable. And because they believe it's not fair that students get to have a loving parent at home that gets to homeschool them, or that they maybe have a little extra money stowed away to send their child to private school.
So, I mean, basically under the guise of choice, we're talking about the elimination of choice, because once private schools take this money and have to obey the government, we know that testing drives the curriculum. And so if you got to test all the kids that are in the private school to get the money, of course, they're going to teach what is going to appear on the test. Otherwise, they're going to look stupid. They're going to get shut down, etc. This is really, I think, incredibly significant. And I hope the folks who are watching this will get in touch with their state legislators and let them know about these concerns. Let them know that Lisa can be a resource on that. Lisa, let's shift to the positive side. What do you think would be some good solutions? Because I mean, there are a lot of parents out there who are super concerned about what's happening in public schools. There are a lot more who are going to be really concerned as awareness of all these things spreads, and it's going to, regardless of what the tyrants at Facebook and YouTube think about it. So what would you say to parents? And then also to add to that, what do you say to parents who are like, well, it's really hard for me to do it without taxpayer money? What are some good solutions for us to help protect children and to get proper education restored?
Well, unfortunately, none of the solutions I'm going to be able to talk about is going to be as flashy and as quick and as easy as let's get some free money from the government. And that's the problem. When people say, well, what are your solutions? My solutions aren't easy, unfortunately, but they are more long term. And so, and they're harder, right? They're harder for families to deal with and come with solutions. So really we have to start building community solutions. And that may look like forming your own micro schools, right? Where I know a mom here in Utah that teaches 10 other people's kids. She homeschools them. And the family shares the cost of the curriculum, and they share the cost of transportation and things like that. And so I think it can be done with very little money, and someone doesn't have to break their bank. And for a single parent, for instance, who may have trouble with this, if they're having this kind of homeschool co-op. They may be able to share that burden with another parent. And so I think that we have to start talking about solutions that build up parents and don't make them slaves to the subsidies of the government. I think that that's sad, that that's the only way we're telling parents that we can empower them to leave this public school system that may be doing them wrong, is to be reliant on the government to do so. I just think that there's so many solutions we could be talking about, but because all of this political energy is being forced behind this move to get parents to take public money to go into private education, unfortunately, we're not talking about a lot of these great community solutions that we could be coming up with.
Yeah, I agree. And, as a homeschool dad, I know homeschooling can be done on very little money, very, very effectively. There's no need for $8,000 per child. Your average homeschooler spends a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that and gets results that are orders of magnitude better than whatever so-called education is being provided in the government schools. Lisa, before we let you go, what is the best way for people to follow you? I mentioned your show, Parents of Patriots. You've got your Substack and you're on Twitter. What are the best ways for people to follow the very important work that you do?
Right, Education Substack, Education Manifesto on Substack. I'm on Twitter and Truth Social at I am Lisa Logan. And probably what you said, my YouTube channel, Parents of Patriots. I really try to walk parents through what's going on with the social emotional learning and why they should be concerned.
Awesome. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a pleasure, extremely informative. And hopefully we'll get you back on with better news some months down the line as these legislatures wind down for the session. Thanks again. Folks, that was Lisa Logan. Go check out her work. Incredibly, incredibly important. And share it with other people, more importantly. Don't just read it and consume it. Send it to your state representative. Send it to your state senator. Send it to your local school board members. Send it to your congressman. This is a critical issue, folks. This may be one of the most critical issues. We're talking about our kids, which means we're talking about the future of our country. I'm Alex Newman. This is Conversations That Matter for the New American Magazine. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, God bless you all.
They say I'm part of a global plan. I don't think so. It's too hot, it's too cold. You know what? The weather changes.
Here's the news, Dad.
Nope. It's hard to tell what's real and what's fake these days.
Ditch the fake news and always get the truth. Go to thenewamerican.com.